What I want to talk to you a little bit about today is about the opioid epidemic that we have in our country. Um, it has hit the West Coast. Those of you that live on the East Coast may already be aware of it, um, but because it's been rampant on the East Coast for a while now. I don't know how long, maybe 7 years, maybe 10 years, but it's now hit the West Coast, and it's getting worse, and it's been shocking to me. So my art, the art that I do on my channel, I love to do. I love to. That's kind of like my getaway, and a way to connect with something that kind of helps my brain to relax. I am a substance abuse counselor, chemical dependency counselor, alcohol and drug counselor, whatever you want to call it, okay? And that is the job that I do 40 hours a week. And I do love my work. I actually am a DUI specialist. So I specialize in education for people that get DUIs and managing, what they have to do as a result of getting a DUI. However, I also help out in the MAT program, which is medicated assisted treatment. And that is for people who are addicted to opioids. So what we used to see in the past would be heroin. People would become addicted to heroin, and back in the day, a medicated assisted treatment would be a methadone clinic, and people would go to a methadone clinic and they would have to dose every morning, and it was something that would keep them from going into withdrawal, and also make it so that they couldn't get loaded on heroin. And now there is a newer drug called Suboxone, which you could research if you want to, and that is an opioid replacement as well. You don't drink it. Usually, typically do like a tab under the tongue or something twice a day. And then you can also get a shot that will last for 30 days. So that's really good for people that are committed to, staying sober and staying off of heroin or the new drug, fentanyl. I say fentanyl in a disgusting way because fentanyl is something that is very, very powerful. It's more powerful than heroin, and people don't realize that. Fentanyl, I don't know how long it's been legal. The people that have the patent on fentanyl made billions of dollars off of being able to bring this to the public. Now, for people that have terrible back pain, it was not released so that you could take it in a pill form or anything, because it's highly dangerous to use. It was released in the form of a patch. People could get a fentanyl patch. In fact, when Prince passed away, I believe it was due to an overdose, he was using fentanyl patches for his back, but I believe he was also taking some kind of medication, like Percocet or something like that, right? And it was too much. Fentanyl's very, very strong. So the people who deal in drugs, right, they've got, excuse me, they've got some scientists, some bad scientists or whatever, that are going to profit illegally. They've been able to figure out the chemical makeup of the fentanyl through the patch, and they have started manufacturing it in a pill form, and it looks just like a blue pill that you would get from a doctor, a prescribed pill. So it looks like the real deal. And people will buy these on the street. I think it looks like a Percocet, but I'm not sure. A 30 milligram Percocet. They're blue pills. So the illegal drug, what do you want to call it? Or not companies. The illegal drug manufacturers have been able to make this blue pill, and it looks like an OxyContin or a Percocet, whatever it is, a 30 milligram, and people buy them on the street thinking they're buying a prescription pill, thinking that they're buying something that somebody was able to get from a pharmacy, but they're not. They're buying an illegal made pill. They smoke it, they snort it, and they take it orally, okay? Most people will snort it, and they'll snort a very little bit. What's dangerous about snorting it is that, or they'll snort the whole damn pill. But what's dangerous about snorting it is it doesn't have to go through the pass-through system in your body. So your body, when you take something orally, it's going to lose some of its potency. And of course, the people who, decide what milligrams to make for the human body are taking that into consideration. It's called the pass-through before it gets into your system. However, if you crush it up and snort it, which is what people like to do, or you crush it up and smoke it, it's instant. Okay, smoking is the most instant way to get something, not shooting it up, but smoking it. So, people who are addicted to opiates and need to have an opiate, they're going to do it any way they can. But with the illegal manufacturing of these pills, it's not regulated. So you can't say, oh, there's 30 milligrams of fentanyl in here. And 30 milligrams of fentanyl is way, way stronger than 30 milligrams of the Percocet or whatever it is that they look like, okay? Way stronger. I want to say this again. Fentanyl is stronger than heroin. It's something that you would be given on your way into surgery or something, or if an ambulance picked you up and you were in tremendous pain because you have broken parts of your body from a car accident or something like that, they might give you a little bit of fentanyl. But these people are taking these pills. Oh, it just makes me I'm sorry I get emotional. But it's not an intentional overdose when this happens to people. And they are overdosing, okay? I've had DUI clients overdose on fentanyl. This is not something you see, okay? These are not people that are doing a bunch of drugs, okay? There are people that become serious drug addicts over time, and maybe they commit crimes in order to get a hold of their drugs, and maybe they're not able to keep a job. Maybe they don't. Maybe sometimes they're living on the street and they're homeless, and I don't want to say I accept it, but I would understand an overdose in that situation a lot easier than I would understand somebody who has a place where they live, they have a job, they're paying their bills, they happen to get a DUI, and lo and behold, they think that they're taking something that is a real prescription, and they overdose. So prior to fentanyl becoming legal, I've been in this business for 10 years, maybe 11 years, and or I should say not this business, but this field, because I want to help people. We would see people come in, they want to get sober, usually people that were on heroin. They would be fearful. Maybe they had overdosed, but they lived, right? So overdose doesn't mean that you die, but it means that you're going to die if you don't get help. So sometimes people will overdose and somebody calls the ambulance and they're able to be saved, okay? Sometimes not. But we would see maybe one in an entire between all of the counselors, mental health and addictions, maybe we'd see one a year. And it's very sad. I never, ever had one from a DUI client. Never. Until recently. And so this is why I want you all to know about this fentanyl and how dangerous it is. And if you know anybody who buys something on the street, you want to tell them that it might not be the real deal. In fact, most likely, it's not a Percocet. It's not a drug that is a prescription drug. It's a fentanyl. It's made with fentanyl illegally, and you don't know how much is in it. Like, you could take one and not really feel anything. And you could take another one, and it could kill you. And it kills people. Fentanyl has no business being on the market. I just can't believe it that they did that with the patch. You know, at first I kind of thought, hey, that's a great idea, but now with what's going on with it, no. Here's another thing I want to tell you. There's people that like to use speed, right? They don't want to be taking opiates and doing the downer and the zone out thing. They want to do the speed thing, okay? So if you take a pill that's prescribed to you and it's legal, that's called an amphetamine. If you take something that's illegal, it's manufactured, we call that methamphetamine. The illegal drug manufacturers are now putting fentanyl into methamphetamine because fentanyl is so highly addictive that I think they're putting it in cocaine too. It's going into everything to help speed up that addiction that takes place in your brain at some point, where the midbrain becomes more powerful than the frontal cortex, okay? So our frontal cortex is where our reasoning is. It's also where our memory is, but this is where our reasoning is and our ability to understand consequences, okay? All up here in the frontal cortex. Drugs and alcohol, everything else, everything that gets us high or gives us a buzz, right? That registers in the middle part of the brain, okay? And that is where the pleasure and reward center is, all right? That is the survival part of the brain. That is the part of the brain that says this is good for survival. So typically when things are good for survival, we get dopamine, okay? We get these chemical releases that are like, hey, this feels good, I like it, right? So sex is enjoyable, it releases dopamine. My cat's meowing because I have the door shut. Sex is enjoyable and releases dopamine. Why? Because if we didn't have children, our species would die out, right? When we eat food, it's enjoyable. You know how you have your favorite food where you're like, oh my God, I'm craving this food, right? Because when you eat that food, it releases dopamine, okay? It releases a good feeling, a good chemical in the brain. And the brain says, this is good for survival, right? When you quench your thirst, oh, it's nice. You don't get high from it, but it's nice, right? That you're having a release of a good chemical, a feel-good chemical. All drugs, including alcohol, that get into the blood-brain barrier and produce a high are mimicking a chemical that our brain naturally makes, okay? Only it is a very, very intense release of that chemical, a lot more than what we get naturally. Therefore, the brain, the midbrain says, oh, this is good for survival. This is good. But it's not good. It's not good for survival. It'll ruin your life, right? And then what happens over time of use is that the midbrain sends signals to the frontal cortex and memory and says, remember this. Remember this is good for survival. And eventually what happens is when somebody has a craving for drugs, which could be when they're under stress, now they want to get high because they're feeling stress, okay? That is a normal response that you need to do something for survival when you feel stress. But what happens over time is that the frontal cortex doesn't even make a decision about it or think about consequences. What happens is the craving becomes so strong that when the brain gets a stress signal and the brain gets a signal to want to use some kind of a relief or have some kind of relief, the thought, the thought of getting loaded just goes right past. It like runs by the frontal cortex, like nope, we're not even stopping here, man. We are going right to the midbrain, and we're going to have that signal, and we're going to have that craving. And that's what makes it so difficult to stop addiction. Okay. And that's what can make it difficult for somebody, even if they've already overdosed on fentanyl, even if they know people that are dying from overdosing on fentanyl. They will still do it because why? Not because they're idiots, not because they have a moral failing, because that's what addiction does to the brain, okay? It takes over your brain and it screws it up to the point to where your ability to think of consequences and your ability to have a rational thought about these things is overpowered by the pleasure and reward center in the brain. Okay? Good to know. Here's another thing that's really good to know. I know that people will do things like steal and rob and be very rude and mean when they want to have their drug and they can't get it. They can be difficult to be around, but all of that is due to having an addiction. Okay, and it's a disease. Okay, being addicted to substances is considered a disease, like cancer is a disease. People say, "Well, you chose to use the drug, so it's your fault." Well, if you've ever been a person that's experienced extreme cravings, and that's all you can think about, it's really hard not to use. You have to really want to not to use, and you have to have a lot of support and people telling you, you can do this, you can get through this, it won't last forever. Yes, it's going to be tough. Let's get you to detox. Let's get you into residential so you have good support around you while you're going through this. But there's a lot of fear for people, okay? And that is all part of the disease. And I just want to say that punishing a person for having a disease or treating them like they're a degenerate type person, like, oh, I'm glad they overdosed. No, it's a disease. You saying that about a cancer patient that died? I'm glad they died of cancer. It's their fault they got cancer. Oh, it's your fault you got skin cancer. You went out in the sun. I mean, whatever, right? We have a lot of toxins around our earth. I mean, anybody could get cancer. There's all kinds of diseases that we get. We don't tell the diabetic, hey, you ate a piece of cake. You're a diabetic and you ate a piece of cake. So guess what? We're not giving you your insulin anymore. How do you like that? I mean, we don't treat people like that, but for some reason, we treat addicts like they're just POSs, and they're not. They're human beings, and when you get to know them, they usually have tremendous trauma in their lives. And so maybe at one time, drinking alcohol, smoking weed, doing drugs could have saved their lives, but then it becomes a problem. Anyway, very strong opinions about that. But I want you guys to know about the fentanyl because it's out there, it's here to stay, and it's in everything. So don't freaking do it. Don't freaking do it. It's going to kill you. Okay? Be on the lookout for that stuff. Just assume that nobody's selling their prescriptions. I know people will sell their prescriptions to make money, but just assume when you see that blue pill, it has not been made at a lab. It's been made illegally, and it just might take your life very suddenly and very tragically. If you have any questions, just ask me and I'll be happy to answer. I'm going to also talk about cannabis hyperemesis, which is something that can develop from long-term cannabis use and people don't know about it. And it gets misdiagnosed as cyclical vomiting. And I'm going to do a video about that too. And I think I'm just going to start a channel on addiction and talk about addiction and talk about DUI and things like that. But I am going to continue to do my art because that's my me time, and I have to have that in dealing with this this field that I'm in. And yeah, it's tough, but you know, I do it because I do this job because I think that people should put their money where their mouth is, or whatever that saying is, right? If you want to have a better community, then I want to know what you're doing to make your community better. You know, I want to make the community better. I want to be able to help people, and there's no person on this earth that is a throwaway person. Everybody matters, and addiction's a disease, and we need to treat it as such. Maybe have some compassion. Okay, peace. See you guys soon.